Okay. So here is what I'd like to do is not only provide this as a recording for individuals who were not able to make it, but the PowerPoint slides that I have, I think will also be a good resource. It'll be a reminder at least of what the conversation is, but we'll be going through those. Hopefully that will be an added blessing to equip you as you interact with the students. Are there any initial questions that you may have before we jump into some of the specifics of our PowerPoint?
Thank you.
And Ken, I did get your chat, your note that you didn't receive it either. All right. Let me go ahead then and start by getting us set with the PowerPoint. I just want to confirm, can you see the PowerPoint at this point? Yes, okay, great. Well, if I can just begin with a genesis of these two courses. Some of you, this is your first time teaching it, or you're dealing with a first year DMin student, so you will be interacting this spring with Contextual Engagement 1. For some of you, this is your second time around, where this is the second semester or second spring that the DMin student has, so they're taking Contextual Engagement 2. We're doing these together because they're identical in terms of the syllabi. They're just a reiteration of the process for the students, a different topic, a different challenge that they'll be engaged in. Usually in Contextual Engagement 2, they're probably already choosing some facet of what their dissertation project is going to be. There may be a possibility in Contextual Engagement 1 where that facet of, or a facet of their projected dissertation, that it would include a part of that facet. If that's the case, then there's a unique conversation we need to have. We'll talk about that a little bit later on. So here's a quick question for us, at least that helped us in developing this course. The simple question was philosophical: how are challenges in ministry usually addressed? Now, we have an agenda. The purpose for these classes is to answer that question. What would be some of your answers? Unless you're already looking at the PowerPoint, you've got the answers there. But how would you answer that for our ministers today, whether they're at an undergrad, grad, or doctoral level? If they're lead pastors in the churches, how are challenges in ministry usually addressed? How would you answer that?
I think it depends a lot on their personality and their style of how they learn, but I think many of them will look for models. They'll look for other people that have maybe faced a similar thing and try and collaborate with them.
Yeah, and that's a time saver as well. If the wheel's already been created, then borrow from someone else and see if we could fit that into our own culture. Yeah, good. Again, and probably that's a temptation to do in a negative way, in that it may simply be a cut and paste without a true appreciation of, does this fit our culture? In addition, it doesn't really help to equip the leader to learn themselves, to be researchers themselves, to exegete their own culture and context. They've just simply borrowed from others. But sure, and that does happen. Can you think of others?
Well, usually a first level problem solving technique is we go back into the archive of our own experiences and try to find a similar solution that might fit the current challenge.
Yeah, good, sure. What's worked in the past? Yeah. Let me give you a couple of thoughts here. Some would answer it this way: do what we've always done. Do what the big church down the road did. Unless you're the big church, then you go to the point number one, do what we've always done. Number three, do what my old pastor did or my successor did. Do what they said to do at the conference, assuming that it's the same culture. Do what that blog says to do. Do what that business book said to do. I'm just going to guess. And others, and I don't want to belittle this because I do think it should be integrated in every aspect. But pray. But some would simply say, I'm just going to pray harder. What's missing in this, although again prayer is critical, what's missing in this is critical thinking, research, being a minister, a pastor who is also going to be a researcher, a critical thinker. Unfortunately, I think the internet has fostered a bit of laziness for us because someone has come up with it. A book is out there or a conference is there, so I'll just get the latest thing without truly thinking it through ourselves. So here's a part of what this course wants to resolve, is to help to equip them. What's needed is a framework for decision and action. How am I? What lenses will I be using, not only to do the research, but also to implement what I have discovered. Adaptability to different contexts. It doesn't always fit. Some principles don't always fit in certain cultures. To be founded on the scriptures. I was going to give a story, but we'll just move on. To be guided by the Spirit. That it's not just quickly going to the internet, finding something, getting a book, but to truly hearing from God himself. Integration with proper application of research, theological reflection, and human reason. Again, seeing what the experts have discussed. That's where literary review is critical. What have others said? How have others reasoned this issue and this challenge? And also to understand God and how God is working in the situation and what he wants us to do. I think there's quite a bit of steps, quite a bit of components that are needed for our pastors to really think through their challenges. That's a little bit of what this course is about, is to ask the pastor or the minister, not all of them are pastors, ask them, what is the challenge in your current ministry? And how can you think academically, think critically, think theologically, biblically, spiritually about these issues to begin to develop a rationale, develop a methodology, a solution, and then carry it out. And then once you've carried it out, how do you evaluate it? The steps, the paradigm for doing this, you're going to find in the syllabus is pretty much the same paradigm that we have for our DMin students in their dissertation. What I've shared in the past with the mentors who are moving into their role as the dissertation chairs is that the dissertation process for the student has the 5 chapters, and each of those chapters have certain sections. Well, these courses are sort of a microcosm of what they're doing in the bigger picture of, can we within a semester expose them to the same verbiage, the same paradigm of, here's the issue, here is why this is an issue, this is the theology behind this solution, here is the literary review, that what others have written about this, here's the methodology and the goals and objectives on how I'll fulfill or address this issue. And then here's how I carried it out, and here's my evaluation of how I've carried it out. That is the nuts and bolts of what this course is, really. A microcosm, really, of what their program, their dissertation is about. Some of you, I think of Don and Greg, the two of you, you've gone through this already. So you have a little bit unique perspective because you were DMin students who survived the program. I don't know if you have any thoughts, whether you even had the same you went through this in the same structure. I'm not quite sure. Any thoughts that you two would have?
What really jumps off the page at me, Dr. Vigil, is the last point you made, and is how do we evaluate after implementation? And that is often the missing piece. Devising a framework a little bit easier than circling or coming full circle to actually examine if the framework did its job.
I think there may be the challenge is once we've done the job, there are now new jobs for us to tackle, and so having the time to evaluate, to assess.
Yeah, for me, Jim, it was adding the greater community, like you were saying, of the research, of looking at different things outside of what I would normally draw on. I would normally do all that list you gave before in reverse, which means guess first and then work my way back, to try to solve a problem. But what this, I think, course really does is it gets you to think outside of your normal circle. It's not normal, I think, for pastors to think, I'm going to go do some research on this problem. It's normal to think I'm going to handle it like I did in the past, or all that list you gave. We draw on all of those, any of those, but not usually the wider circle. And this, I think, is a great course because it really helps you think outside of normally the way that you would process dealing with the problem.
Yeah, thanks for adding that. That's a good insight. Anyone have any questions? Feel free to interrupt or interject at any time.
It's interesting that Lawrence Peters wrote the Peter Principle based on the fact that we tend to handle things the same way over and over and over again, which is why we eventually get to the point of the Peter Principle. But the program that we are working with here adds to the number of resources that the people we're working with, our DMin students, have access to, whether it's through a mentor or through their research or through broadening their network. So they don't have to be stuck in the same old. They're able to find fresh ways, new ways, godly ways to handle the situations that are changing. And with Adam that I'm working with down in Costa Rica, things have changed so drastically in the last year just because of the COVID restrictions. He's got to deal with the American restrictions as well as the local restrictions in Costa Rica. But he has new resources, so he's not stuck in the old rut.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very good. Very good. Thank you, Paul.
Dr. Vigil, I think it may be important to, in my conversations with my mentee, one of the things that I think that may be important for Doctor of Ministry study that is oftentimes in many DMin programs not emphasized is methodological approach to study. Because there's one thing to have an approach to assessment of the problem, which I think sometimes is also impoverished. But I think there are two different facets, and I'm glad to see that we're getting at the gestalt of problem identification and be able to find solutions to that particular problem, but then the methodology of study to produce that solution. So whether it's going to be case study, whether it's going to be historic ethnography, whether it's going to be mixed method research, those kind of things help frame the study for the student. And if we as mentors can kind of guide them in that process, then that helps them to be able to have the kind of cogent framework out of which to be able to methodologically produce the kind of answers that will methodology for the entire study will determine whether or not they do focus groups, how large the kind of sample surveys or whatever that they're doing. So I think there may be some, I don't know how much, this is my first time going through it, I don't know how much of that is integrated into the program, but I think it's just a worthy consideration.
Thank you, Jonathan. And there have been some students that have gone that far into it within their semester course. Others, the semester is just too short of a time for them to begin to develop that fully. Others, again, they use that simply as a half step, initial survey, certain approaches to their methodology, knowing that it was just going to be a facet to their dissertation. But that's the hope too, is that we'll fight against this potential of laziness within that ministers can. And I don't call it laziness because oftentimes it is efficiency, that I don't have time because there's so many other things I have to do. And unfortunately, it comes at the cost of them truly thinking things through. We use the word practical theology. That's what we want to create, practical theologians who are in the midst of ministry, engaged in ministry, but not just practitioners, but they are academicians, they are theologians, they are researchers. That takes time. And they are currently, well, they've just completed a course. I'm sorry, the first year DMin students have completed a course with Dr. Ehler on just that, practical theology. I think he stretched them quite a bit to appreciate the challenge of perhaps giving them a mantle, that might be a better phrase, giving them a mantle of being a researcher. That it's okay to be a researcher, and here's how you do some of the research. For some of them, it was a bit overwhelming. Even the terminology wasn't in their vocabulary, but starting that conversation for them in Dr. Ehler's class, then for them to next semester to come in and begin to put some of that together in this course is very helpful for them. So they've been primed. They've been challenged to re-identify themselves, not just as practitioners, but practical theologians. So hopefully we've moved them on. Let me give you just sort of the, let's move into the syllabus. Again, if you have not received the syllabus, I will be sure to send that to you. If I'm not mistaken, that document may have come about a week, 2 weeks ago when I had sent the invitation for you to join us. If you did not receive the syllabus, can you please send a chat note to me, and I'll be sure to include you in that so that you'll have that syllabus. So here's the course description. You'll see how it does describe a little bit of what we are wanting to do. I'm sorry, this course consists of individualized instruction on an issue related to the student's ministry context. The professor and student will work together to devise a research plan to develop a solution for a ministry challenge or dilemma. One of the uniquenesses in this is it's not one professor with the 20 students or 10 students. It's a one-on-one. Consequently, it's a very, very non-traditional approach that you will have. But I think we've already describe those. And I'll talk about the interaction a little bit later on, what that interaction will look like or ought to look like. The ILOs, which are the intended learning outcomes, we have 4 of them. The first is to define a ministry problem in the student's context for research and resolution. And that leads to, if you recall in dissertation, what the research question is. What is it that we want to resolve? What is it that we want to research? What is the issue, the challenge that's there? That would be the first 2 weeks. The student will be dialoguing with you. We'll be doing some initial research and writing as to why is this a legitimate and relevant issue for us to address. Second ILO is develop a research plan. It's to analyze the problem, its cause, and the workable solution. That would be, again, the methodology, the objectives, the goals, and then identify a range of possible solutions drawn from theoretical research and other ministries and other disciplines. With that will include biblical research, theological research, as well as a literary review. Then to evaluate, once they've carried it out, to evaluate the effectiveness of the attempted solution. We'll break those ILOs out into little sort of weekly things and to how the student will be fulfilling those objectives. But let me share with you, and I have noted in the PowerPoint what page this is on in the syllabus for you. But these are the assignments that the student will be responsible for you to grade and assess. And I want to make that clear because you are the instructor for that student. That means you will be responsible for grading that student's work. And and also not just grading that work, but also maintaining that grade until the end of the semester and then submitting that to me. The only thing I will be needing from you are two things at the end of the semester: the final grade, but also the student will need to submit onto what's called MyFire. That's where the student has their interaction with the school and its assignments. Online, they will be uploading their final 30-page paper onto that, and we'll keep that there for their e-portfolio and for our own records to demonstrating that they did the work that was given, required of them. So the first responsibility they have is they need to be dialoguing with you on a weekly basis. So I would encourage you, the first thing you may want to do is to negotiate with that student, put it on your calendar if possible, that every Monday at 10 o'clock, we will meet for 45 minutes, for an hour, whatever that would be, so that that's slotted. But the responsibility really falls on the shoulder of the student to be ready and prepped for that conversation. 3 statements here. The student is expected to be properly prepared for this engagement by completing all readings and writing and other assignments prior to the class interaction. Second, a strong engagement within the student interaction is critical part. And there is a rubric within the syllabus that will help you to gauge on how effective that student is in their dialogue. If they're just shooting the breeze, if you would, and really not discussing or not thinking through or not thinking critically of their issues, they need to know that that will affect their grade in this assignment. The student should contract, we have that, I've already mentioned that, contract with the mentor for that. So I would encourage you, by next week or in 2 weeks, if you would, I believe classes start next week. We want to make sure that they have an understanding as to when you all will be meeting. And it doesn't necessarily have to be rigid every Tuesday at 10 o'clock, whatever works for you. It's just that there are weekly, in the syllabus, there are weekly conversations that need to take place that will keep the student in rhythm, in pace, and just consistent in their growth and their movement. So if you are inconsistent in meeting with them, then that can undermine the momentum that they have in this. And this is what I have found. When mentors have not been consistent in meeting once a week, it does derail that whole process to a point where it can leave the student a little bit disorganized, but also distracted in that process. I don't know if former students who are here with us might be able to affirm that or not, but.
Yeah, if I could, Jim.
Please, Greg.
This is the one class I actually had difficulty with, that I didn't make an A in, let me put it that way. And it was strictly, as great as my mentor was, the communication was there. It just wasn't the understanding of what exactly was expected. And I take all that on my fault, and blame me for that. But finding that first step that seems almost insignificant, but in relationship of everything else, of finding that right problem so that you can do the right research, that you can come to the right decisions, that you could write this 30-page paper that's actually significant, is I think it's real important.
Thanks for sharing that. And I need to share some of that responsibility. The onus falls on ours as well. Greg Phelps, he was one of our guinea pigs. He was the first cohort, part of the first cohort that we had. And so even our mentors were not quite sure. Even the director was not quite sure of what this was. That's why this is important for us to have a session like this, a training session, so that we are all on the same page for the sake of our students. But thanks for sharing that, Greg. Here is.
I had a question for you, if I don't mind, Jim.
Yeah, Mel.
Will you send the syllabus to our student, or do we send it?
No, the student should already have the syllabus. They should have it in their possession. I believe I've already sent that off to them.
Okay, thank you. I wanted to clarify that.
Mhm. So here is the rubric in grading the mentor interaction, the weekly dialogue. The student should have, this is in the syllabus, so the student needs to understand, or they should understand, that it can't simply be them talking with a friend. It's a very specific and intentional strategic conversation that they need to have once a week. And with that, we want to make sure that the spirit of that conversation is also going to be there, that the student is approaching this as a student. And I think one of the virtues of an effective and successful student is that of humility. So the first point of assessment, the criteria, is vulnerability, openness, and engagement within the mentor interaction. Second is that there's thorough preparation for each of those. So the student will already should come with a list of, all right, here's what we're supposed to be talking about today, and here's the challenge, and here's what I've been developing. What do you think? And then allowing you to be that sounding board for them. The third is consistency of commitments, regular appointments, and follow through with tasks. So if you've given them additional tasks, or you've agreed that, okay, next week you should have accomplished this or submitted this or whatever that would be, that if they've done that, that's great. If they have not, then they need to know that's being observed. And the final one is an analytical assessment reflected within the mentor interaction. And that is, again, they're not just looking to you to give them answers, but they're thinking through as well, thinking critically. This is where I would ask you, I think I have this further down in the PowerPoint slides, and that is, your task is not just to be a cheerleader, not just to pat them on the back, but to be a challenger as well. Be the devil's advocate, if you would. Even if whether you agree or disagree, help them not to have blinders on. If you're just applauding and cheering them on, that's going to affirm this narrow focus. If you can encourage them to think more objectively, to bring in other voices, to wrestle with this issue, if you feel as though they already have an answer, they just need to find a proof for that answer, challenge that. The fifth assessment would be criteria, would be a healthy integration of spiritual dynamics within the ministerial challenge. If you're a mentor, we want you not just to be a mentor for the academic facet, but even help them to ask them, okay, what has the Spirit been telling you in the midst of your research? Where's Christ in the midst of this? How have you been growing in this challenge? Help them to think holistically, not just as a student of academics, but as a child of God who is developing and refining their own ministry. I hope that is helpful and clear. The DMin program is not, I've shared this many times with folks, is the final product of the DMin program is not a dissertation. The final product is that student. If they haven't grown, holistically have not grown, then I don't think we have been fair to that student in terms of preparing them as we ought to. Now, a lot of that falls on their shoulder, but we want to make sure that we have at least provided an atmosphere for them to grow holistically. But I want to reinforce this statement again. A student is the driving force for the success of the mentorship by being the primary stimulus for interaction and progress. So for you to be consistent, for you to be there is going to be helpful, but for you to also be that good sounding board for them, I think is going to be critical. Did anyone else want to throw, some of you have already been mentors, and you may be relating to this. If from your side, your perspective, would you like to add anything?
I think an important question here at the beginning is just helping people wrestle with the real questions, so that instead of trying to come up with a solution quickly, I think I found that if they come up with the solution too quickly, that it causes them to not do the research that they really need to do to discover really what the big questions are. So I think in the early stages of this process, it's good to ask questions that help clarify, you know, where the need for research for that person is in their project. So.
Thank you, Daniel. That's a great insight. And you know, I think we all have that sort of temptation of, okay, I think I have a solution. Now I just need to find support for that solution. And without, again, I'll go back to the virtue of humility. Recognize I'm a student. I don't know. Let me learn first and develop that. Ken, it looks like you were going to.
Yeah, I was trying to find the raise hand icon. I couldn't find it. I mean, I see the reactions, but anyways, yeah, just a couple of things I think is important, as Daniel mentioned, helping the student kind of focus in on and better discern and clarify what the real problem research question is about. But I think it's very helpful to keep the contextual engagement 1 and 2 in sight. That is, 2 should be in sight as you're talking about the contextual engagement for 1. When I worked with the student, I thought it was important for them to get into the research and build off what they already done, but also actually write so that something could be started that could be contributed to the dissertation, but not necessarily a final draft of it. I think if you build 1 and 2 see it as a 2-stage process, I think then step 1 or contextual engagement 1 might be more productive. Just a suggestion.
Mm-hmm. We're going to be looking at those sort of options that are there. When we first started the program, it was simply, what is a current challenge you have this semester? Address it. And then what is the current challenge you have in the following spring semester? And then address it. But we found out in terms of retention, but momentum in their entire journey in their DMin program, for them to somehow tie them all together, leading even into the dissertation, seemed to be very positive for the students. So by the time they reach their dissertation, they've already been discussing it, dialoguing it, and the conversation they're having with their mentor, who will then be their chair, has already been established. They don't need to reestablish a new relationship with someone. The mentor's already been walking through with them. So it's very helpful. Yeah, we'll talk about that in just a minute, but thank you so much, Ken. Yeah.
May I raise a question?
Absolutely.
How much of the mentor interaction preparation in Con Ed 1 for their writing is decidedly, and it may be baked in, I'm asking because I don't know and because I've not done this with these students before. How much should we stress, provoke, move the students toward a decidedly Pentecostal framework for their engagement? I am a Pentecostal theologian and a Pentecostal pastor, and so my worldview and approach to ministry, at least I attempt to do so through the lenses of Pentecostal hermeneutic and a Pentecostal engagement. And so I see a lot of the a lot of what we've proffered thus far. I'm just wondering, are we to engage them with a decidedly Pentecostal rubric and approach to ministry that and if so, I mean, are we to usher them in that direction, or is it to be more of a broader tent and allow that exploration to come from them and let them kind of guide that process?
I don't think it's an either or. I think it ought to be a mixture of both, respecting the individuals who are our students who are not Pentecostal, and yet they've recognized they have come to a Pentecostal institution and we are. We don't apologize for having that unique distinctive. So I would encourage you to help them to think through this through a Pentecostal perspective. Now, and I even know that some of you mentors aren't from a Pentecostal tribe. Please feel free to work with them, but recognizing who we are, yes, as Pentecostals, let's make that a part of that. Some of them, again, I can think of one individual who is from a Wesleyan church, not Pentecostal, although I think when in some of my conversation with him, he may be describing himself as a closet Pentecostal. But the application may not be overtly Pentecostal, if you would. On the other hand, Pentecostal, I think, is biblical, that we want to think through. I'd hate to simply note that describe it as simply Pentecostal as much as Pentecostal is a biblical hermeneutical approach of the scriptures, a healthy approach to the scriptures. So welcoming that, encouraging that, that's where the balance, I think, ought to be in us cheering them on. But if they're missing something, then we want to make sure, especially if it comes to the dynamics of the Spirit and the church, a biblical theology of ecclesiology, if you would, then we want to make sure that they're going to be addressing those issues. You are the professor in that interaction. Bring yourself to that interaction with that student. It wasn't haphazard when we put you together with the specific students. Chemistry was important, but part of that chemistry was even theological chemistry for some. So feel free to have that liberty. Please do. I don't know if others, and as I'm sharing this, my boss, the chair of the divinity, is in this group as well. So she may want to add some thoughts to this. Dr. Archer?
Hi, thanks. No, I agree. I really like what Jonathan is asking about, and I would want to say yes to it. But also recognizing, as Jim is saying, not everyone is coming from that perspective. So definitely bring yourself to it and encourage your students in pursuing things through that lens. From my vantage point, there is a distinction with Pentecostal hermeneutics, and if it fits your students' work, then I would definitely want to encourage those types of examinations and ways of thinking. Because I do think it is a distinct way of thinking. And so I would hope that we would feel comfortable, encouraging our students in that regard.
And even if they're not from this tribe, it's okay for us to, again, feel free to share that alternate perspective for them to consider. I think that's why some have come to Southeastern and their DMin program, is because they recognize you're different than my tradition, and I want to learn from that tradition. So don't apologize, even if they may not be from a Pentecostal perspective. But most all of them, I think, are. So you probably have feel the freedom to do that. And Jonathan, I think Michael, I think he'd be pretty excited to hear about that perspective. Yes, your student. Let me move on again for the sake of time here. With the next assignment is a book reading. Again, the first is not really an assignment, but it is one of the criteria for their grade, the mentor interaction. The second is a textbook reading. The syllabus describes it this way: read and prepare a 10-page paper synthesizing 5 ideas from the 4 textbooks related to the student's specific ministry challenge that made the greatest impact, and how those ideas apply to the student's contextual engagement. Selection of specific textbooks will be made in conjunction with the student and the mentor. So the student will have, the textbooks are not are not selected. We don't have those, the titles of those textbooks in the syllabus, because every student is going to have a unique genre of their approach or challenge. So it will be up to the mentor as well as the student to negotiate, to work out at least 4 books that they need to engage in. And within those 4 books, finding the relevance, they need to find 5 topics within those and just synthesize those within the challenge or the project that they have. Just some statements that should be noted within this. Again, each text should be scholarly. Most students are probably going to go quickly to the popular writings that are out there. We want them to go, while they may be relevant, there may be more scholarly approaches that we want them to dive into. Each text should relate directly to the specific challenge. And also note this, usually we have about a 2,000 page minimum for each course. The total text should amount to no less than 1,500 pages. It's understood that in this course, the student's going to do a lot more reading as they do their research, they're developing their theology, but also the contemporary lit review that they'll be presenting as well in this. So 1,500 pages will be from those specific textbooks, but recognizing they will be reading a lot more. And it is assumed that much more reading will be engaged as a student researches and writes. Any questions on the textbooks? Let me add this other caveat, and that is, if you and the student are baffled, you're not quite sure what textbooks might be there in that unique challenge, send me an email, give me a call. And what I can do, and I've done this in the past, is I can send out an email to all the professors here on the campus and say, here's where we're at, here's the challenge, here's the topic. Does anyone have any texts that they would recommend? I've had some great insights from our professors who have come and have shared those with the student and their mentor. So you've got the resource of our professors here on the campus that might be able to assist if for some reason you're finding it difficult coming up with academic textbooks on those topics. Any questions? Yeah, Ken?
Yeah, Dr. Viejo, I would just like to encourage the mentors to consider the importance of theological works. There's no reason why someone should not be engaging in ecclesiastical reflection. I mean, all these actions are done in and as part of a local church and local church ministry. And it may not directly address, but it sure should provide the fodder, the foil in which this work is being developed out of. So I would encourage you to consider maybe a quality theological work that specifically might address one of the theological loci, for example, that would intersect with the particular research question. As I said, it might not directly contribute in trying to answer it, but it sure should be part of the framework of how they're going to think. And as Dr. Vigil said, this is really as much about developing the individual through formation. So I know that my mentee did not see why I would have him read a book by Miroslav Volf, but it caused him to reconsider and think through some things and how that might help him think through other potential challenges in the future. So,
and that's what we're wanting them to do. It's too much a temptation, because that's pretty much been the norm, is to go quickly to their quick practitioners. What have they done? How have they done it? Without really assessing why they've developed it or how they developed it. For us to look theologically, biblically, I think is critical. So I agree that would be great. At least, if you're going to have four books, at least one of those should be a theological consideration. Thank you.
Dr. Vigil, that kind of brings to bear a question. I'm a little nervous to ask the question because it sounds a little lazy on my part, but do we have to read all the books that the student is reading? How does that work?
I would encourage you, you may not have to read it, but rate it. I don't know if it came across clear. You ought to be familiar with it. Yes, the textbooks that are there, and it may be a stretch for you, stretching you in terms of your time, yes, but I think perhaps even your own growth. But I would highly encourage it, because again, if you're going to be grading them as well, and they're already sharing the context of the text, well, if you have not engaged in that text in any way, then it may be a pretty weak assessment of their efforts. Yeah.
That was not the answer I was looking for. But I'm teasing.
And yet, not really. I know, I mean, we're busy folks. I understand. Yes.
Dr. Vigil, one of the things that might be helpful too is, as a mentor, we're working them through the whole process. We also are blessed to have content specialists working with them. And I have appreciated the help that has come from me with the content specialists that's working, because they should be very familiar with the particular focus and can also offer and be involved in some of the discussion, and may be more familiar with the material than you would be. So I think that's also a nice benefit of this particular DMin.
Yeah. Kim, let me put a note to this, though. The content specialist is an individual that will be a resource during their dissertation project. For most of these students haven't identified a context specialist at this point, and would not, are not responsible for doing that until a year, 2 years down the road. But to identify content specialists, I think would be a great conversation. And that's a part of the research, not just the literary research, but who's out there? Can I give folks a call? Can I email them? Can I establish relationships with these content specialists? Especially if that topic is going to be a part of their dissertation. To start those relationships early on could be pretty advantageous. Yeah, thanks. All right, well, there's the mentor interaction. There's the textbook assignment. That's a 10-page assignment. Then there are 2 assignments. The first is called a 3-page draft, and it will be identifying, the potential challenge to be addressed within the student's current ministry. So, and this will be done in the first 2 weeks. They'll have to submit. By the second week, if I'm not mistaken, they need to submit this 3-page draft of, here's the issue, here is the problem, and here's why I have thought through this problem. Now, it's called a draft for a specific reason, and you'll see the highlighted box that's here. It's a draft in that there is no need for you as the professor or mentor to edit or assess the paper. Just read to confirm that the student is on the right track. A grade is given only for its submission. Now, the purpose for this draft is to make sure that this student is doing some writing during this during their semester journey. My concern is that they would not do any writing until the last week. And at that last week, they've got to come up with this 30-page paper. If we can have them chip away at it already, then that 30-pager is not going to be a monster. They'll be able to handle that. So this keeps them on pace. So by I'm just throwing out a date. We've got the dates later on here, but January 28th, the 3-page draft needs to be submitted. Again, you don't read it. You don't need to read it necessarily for a grade, maybe for content perhaps, but making sure that they truly did write it and interact with it. Because what they'll be doing is they'll be taking this 3-pager and then the next assignment, the 15-page draft, and that will be a large portion of what that 30-pager is going to be. So the three pager be due probably the end of January. The 15 pager will probably be due around 1st of March, something like that, if not the end of February, where the student now does their the research. And the research is twofold. The research is it will be developing the theology, as well as elaborating on their literature review. What have folks written about this topic, but before they do that, what is the theology that's there, and how does the theology that I developed dialogue with the contemporary lit that I've uncovered? That's their 15-pager. So the 3-pager is, here's the problem, here's why I think it's an issue, here's the theology in the midst of this. This is the theology that will guide my approach, but also my approach to addressing this will be based on the contemporary literature that I've interacted with as well. Those are the two drafts that they need to submit. You don't need to grade the drafts. They will, other than grading it and recognizing acknowledging it as a submission. Again, that just helps to keep them in rhythm, so that when they do finish everything off, they already have this. And having that 15-pager midterm is also going to guarantee that they are being primed already for the engagement, for the implementation of that project. Any questions on that? Okay, the final is the 30-page paper incorporating the complete process of the contextual engagement. It should include a description of the final implementation and the evaluation, which is sort of what is missing. The methodology, the implementation, and then the evaluation is the second half of what that paper is. They've already developed the first half, the 3-pager and the 15-pager. Then they finish off with that second half of the methodology, however they've worked it, and the analysis of that and evaluation, kind of that conclusion. There is in the back of the syllabus, the last page of the syllabus, there is a grading rubric for that 30-page essay. Okay, so that should be able to assist you in evaluating that student's submission. All right, a little bit more specific components here in regards to the timeline and the percentages. Really, well, this gives a one-sentence description of what we just discussed. What's valuable in this table, I think, is that last column, and that is the due date. If you can put that in your calendar and remind the student of those dates as well, that will be important. So the identifying the challenge, that initial draft is the 17th of January. Their theology and contemporary lit review, that contextual study we call it, is February 14th. Their textbook review, that is the synthesizing those 5 topics, is March 20th, and then their final draft is due April 24th. Graduation, I believe, is the 30th of September. Yes.
September. You mean April, right?
Oh, what did I say? December?
September, I think.
September.
Right?
Yes, I meant April. Yes, thank you, Daniel. This is this page can, for at least assist you visually. This helps you to see how that rhythm is to be. if that first section is identifying the potential challenge, you have the first 2 weeks. And again, your syllabus is broken out into weeks. Week 1, you should have discussed this. They should have addressed this. They should already be engaging in this first book, whatever. The textbook would outline those for you. But generally speaking, that first section, identifying the problem, they have 2 weeks to address that. And then developing then their objectives, their goals, establishing that purpose and addressing the challenge, not the goals, I'm sorry, but addressing that challenge is week 3. Week 4 and 5 is the development of their theology and also the lit review. Hopefully they've already begun doing that review, but that's when they need to be turning in that assignment. Week 6 and 7 is developing their goals, their objectives, the methodology, and carrying out their project. And then weeks 8 and 9, developing, submitting the methodology. And then 5 weeks, to 10 to 15, is implementing their project, and then also evaluating that project. Again, leading to April 24th submission. But these are a simple way for you to help to keep them on pace. Any questions?
Yes, Jim. So classes start on the 13th and their first 3-page paper is due 4 days later on the 17th. Is that correct?
On the 13th? It does start on the 13th.
Do DMin classes start earlier?
Yeah, no, they start.
Okay, so sorry.
No, you're correct. I have that down as the 17th. Now, let me say this. The syllabus is there. It doesn't have to be rigid. If you feel that the 17th is not enough, give that student that extra week or whatever may be necessary. I've shared this with students, not just in these courses, but in all the DMin courses. While I may be the director, within those specific courses, the professor is the captain. I want to give you that privilege of saying, okay, my student is doing good work, but to do the acceptable work, they may need another week. Work that out with them. I just don't want you to be too flexible that they're taking advantage of you. Any other questions? Thank you for bringing that out. Okay. Well, here's again, this is in your syllabus in terms of the specific things. That first 2 weeks, what are some issues that we want to bring up? Again, identifying the potential challenge. Just some points. Again, consider areas within one's ministry in need of further development. Again, or it could be that it's a half step, it's a foundational step for their dissertation, proposed dissertation. If multiple challenges arise, again, give reason through the budgeting of time and resources along with sense of urgency. Help them to see this cannot be done in one semester. Is there any way you can do a half step of that project in this one semester? And assist them in that. Again, discuss ideas with the doctoral mentor and cohort peers, review previous coursework for new perspective and ministry situation. Again, helping them to identify that challenge. The second step, where they have a few more weeks to interact with, is developing the purpose for addressing the challenge. Why is this so important? This really leads to, or it can be worded in another way, this develops their research question. What is it that we want to resolve? We've identified there's problems that are here, but how is it and what is it that we want to address? The next, again, the contextual study deals with the theological context as well as the literary context. Theological review of the issue, but also the literary review of the issue. This is really the substance, I think, of what their paper should be about. We want them to think theologically, but we also want them to think practically. What is out there? This is where they, I think, will be demonstrating their literary review or research. And hopefully they'll have learned with Dr. Ehler's course what that entails. Again, setting the goals, objectives, the methodology. There are several weeks that the student will be able to interact with those courses. Again, I'm trying to be careful with your time, and we're already past the 12 o'clock time. I do want to note this, that if a student is, and let me take the time to read this because this may arise. If your student intends to include their course project as a foundational step in their projected dissertation, Dr. Ken Archer had alluded to this. Some, and I wouldn't hesitate to say probably a majority of students are probably going to want to go in that direction, is how can I create some half steps or initial steps to my dissertation project? First of all, they need to recognize that it's not a for sure thing. They have eventually to submit a proposal that needs to be accepted for that. But recognizing that they have the approval of their chair, their mentor, and I'm already a part of this. You already have 2 people on the committee who's already nodding their head, giving them the green light. But if that is the case, this is an important note. All qualitative and quantitative research that engages in human subjects, it must be approved by the IRB, which is the Institutional Review Board that oversees any research that's done when there are human participants engaging in the research, whether it be, goodness, for us, for the most part, it's usually surveys, interviews, questionnaires. We want to make sure that that in no way is going to be threatening these individuals from emotionally, psychologically, professionally, ministerially, whatever. The IRB has to have that. So if the student, if it's just for your class, and it stays in the class, then that's fine. You do not need IRB approval. But if this is going to be utilized in the published work of their dissertation, then it needs to go through IRB. Otherwise, that research will not be acceptable when they begin doing their dissertation. Training can be accessed if that's the case. The student should already be trained in what is called the city training, and that's our approved certification for IRB. If that is the case, both the professor and the student needs to be trained. The student is already trained through Dr. Ehler's class. You would need also to be trained in the city training. And city training, it's an online course. I'll be honest, I think it's about a 3-hour. Those of you that have taken it, Dr. Melissa Archer is going like this. So it's about a 3-hour engagement. You can chip away at it. You can do 45 minutes in one, and then the next day come back and continue that interaction. But you have to, the student, for them to receive approval from the IRB, they have to they have to submit an application request and also submit the certificates from the mentor as well as the students. And I'll help you to put all that together if you are needing to submit it to the IRB. In fact, let me make that almost a mandate. Before you send it to the IRB, send it to me first, because that will help to expedite it. I'm on the IRB. I know the questions they're asking. So I'll be able to quickly edit it for you and tell you, tweak this, add this, don't say this, or whatever, so that when you do submit it, it will be expedited a lot quicker than if they had to send it back to you back and forth, okay? Any questions on that?
I have a question, Jim.
Yeah, Paul?
My student his project involves mentoring local pastors in his area of ministry. Does that whole project need to go before the IRB since he's mentioning these people by name? It's not necessarily his research, but his practical ministry that works with these individuals.
And is that going to be a part of his dissertation?
I believe so.
Okay, then, and if he's going to be, there's a bit of an ethical, whether he interacts with them or not, there is an ethical editorial that I would want to add to say, I'm not sure, if you're going to have this published, should you have the names of those individuals that might be critiquing their own ministries. That could end up being, guilty of libel. So we want to be very cautious in what they do say about those individuals that are there. My recommendation would be, especially if it can be published, is if they would leave the names out. But if they are interacting with questionnaires and they know who those individuals are, and it would be easy. Well, again, if they're interacting with individuals in questionnaires, the IRB is saying, then it qualifies. They need to submit a request to the IRB for approval. So if he's using names and going to be interacting with them, they're participants. He's not just writing about or reflecting on an article or a book with those names are in there, but he's interacting with these individuals. Then he's responsible for submitting this request to the IRB.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Great question. Perhaps I should send this to you as well. We have a manual for the dissertation. It's about a 30-page manual for the students. And this is the largest section really of that manual of the IRB, that helping them with the process, helping with the training, but also just some of the details and in understanding the why and for having this criteria. Any other questions you might have? Okay. Then again, the final step is just that evaluation implementation. And that's when that's the bulk of the time limit. At least they have five weeks that they're interacting with the students. Implementing, evaluating, here's some thoughts for them to interact with. Helping them to assess this. This is very, very simplified. I would expect them to go deep within their assessment, but this gives some thoughts. Some of this is already within the syllabus that you can reflect on. Again, you will have this PowerPoint at the end of this session, if you don't already have it. Here are some topics that are available that you can take into consideration if the student's not quite sure, or if you're not quite sure, just what are some topics that just to get a better picture of what these contextual engagements are about. There are several examples that are here, from planning a new church campus. Now, that's a huge challenge. My suggestion would be perhaps their contextual engagement may be developing the demographics rather than the entire church plan. Others have done a revision of their bylaws. Others did a sermon series for their contextual engagement, a missions trip, retreat, different events. Again, for you as a mentor, the challenge or the responsibility you have is twofold. Again, challenge them, but cheer them. Communicate regularly, keep them on track, respond quickly, but help them to identify and narrow down that research question. As Daniel had noted, oftentimes you get stalled out because they haven't articulated quite just what is it that they want to accomplish. That will be critical on the front side. Provide significant, well thought out feedback. Don't hesitate to recommend alternatives. Don't give simple answers. Suggest specific improvements. Visit them if necessary, if you can, to see firsthand what that engagement is all about, if it is truly carrying something out within their church. As I mentioned earlier, the only thing I'm expecting from you is that you submit the final grade to me, but also make sure that student submits or uploads their final paper on their MyFire page. Again, they're aware of what that entails. The final paper is due April 23rd, 2021. 24th is what I told you, I believe. 23rd, 24th. I'll leave that up to you. Any questions on this? All right. Well, I'll tell you, extroverts are very quick in coming up with questions. Introverts have to process things a little bit longer. So if most of you are introverts, then I want to let you know, again, my phone is open. My email is ready to receive any comments or questions you have. I want to equip you to be the best mentor our students have had. So if there's anything I can do to have to equip you in that, please let me know. But hey, God bless you. We are past time, and I apologize for that. But thank you for taking the time to interact. I truly pray God's anointing and God's blessing be upon you with wisdom, with patience, with grace, but also with an example of His care, His integrity as well in your lives and in your interaction. God bless you. I pray you have a wonderful, wonderful semester.